not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it sounds like there's a lot of chatter about Bully's January plans, and they're already planning to go big. One thing we didn't get to talk to is about Pulisic's quote coming out from his upcoming book. Apparently he's looking to go to Juventus, but I'm sure you have maybe a penny for your thoughts on that one.
Yeah. He wants to read a Christian Pulisic book. That's my thought. Not me.
Well, apparently neither Tuchel.
Yeah, not me. So
I mean,
let's leave it there.
I will say this, because I don't think I've had a chance to talk about this. There's no way he would have known that Tuchel wouldn't have been there when they started writing this book months and months and months ago, right? So the publishing before the World Cup, just from like a commercial perspective, makes sense. But to include some bits in there that were, I wouldn't say like he wasn't swearing them out or anything like that, but like we're not clearly friendly towards his current manager. If he would have still been here, I think that would be worse than Lukaku's incident last year.
It'd be a big story. Yeah, you're right. It would be a big story. You know, it would be this press conference, wouldn't it, coming up, because it was in the break. It would be one of the first questions, yeah, and it would be we've just been talking about Steve Atkins. In the meantime, we'd have also been talking to Steve Atkins about how the club feel about it and all sorts like that. Yeah, it just, the whole thing, that quote, him doing a book at this stage of his career, the fact that this is a guy who shows barely any interest in talking to the press, even when things are going well, let alone things are going badly. And yet he wants to tell all his story in his own words with no one being able to actually ask him any questions or anything like that, just so it's all from his point of view. It all sits badly with me, and it's going to do him. Look, I'm sure there are a lot of people who do want to read a Christian Pulisic book. He's a huge star, obviously, in the US, and he's a huge star in England, in fairness. But it doesn't sit well. It's not a very clever move. I don't really see what, other than some money, reputationally and everything else, I don't really see what he's going to gain from it at all.
To your point, the biggest thing he's going to gain is not having to talk to people he doesn't want to about this. This is his way of getting it out in the public. And to your point, there are pros and cons to it. And I'm pretty sure he's aware of that.
I'm always very suspicious of people who only like talking one way without having anything the other way, whether it's Christian Pulisic or anybody else.
What about Juventus? Him and Weston McKennie going to link up?
Juventus seemed to be sort of something that was bubbling around during the summer. Pulisic was offered places. I think there were talks about him going and stuff. It was one of those that just didn't happen, but you can see it picking back up in January. I mean, look, the thing from Pulisic's point of view is he's got an opportunity, whether he plays much at Chelsea between now and then or not, he's got an opportunity at the World Cup to massively change the course of his career if he wants to. Because I know United States are having a very tough time, a bit like England at the moment, but if Pulisic can just have one fabulous game or do something that catches everybody's attention at that World Cup. World Cups do lead. You don't have to do a lot at World Cup, actually, to get a big move. One moment can really, like I say, produce that big move. And I think the World Cup will be massive for him in terms of where his sort of career path goes there onwards.
It's what Soccernomics tells you not to do, is to buy players after the World Cup. But
everybody does. Everybody still does. I mean, everybody's been saying that since Italia 90, don't buy players on the World Cup. And yeah, everybody always does.
One that popped up, I think kind of just as the transfer window closed, and I think some of the uncertainty around the manager change is around Trev, right? Trev's a guy who I think, really played a great season last year. I mean, I just came away so impressed with him, and it's not without mistakes, of course, but he's still a relatively young footballer playing at the highest level in the Premier League and the Champions League. Scored goals for Chelsea, but it doesn't feel like he's long for Chelsea at this stage of his career. And that can all change. Obviously you get a couple of good performances under you and maybe you become a starter, but do you know anything about, potential moves for him at this stage?
It's difficult to judge him at the moment because like we said, we're almost starting again with Potter now. And I know he didn't start that first game with Potter, but I would imagine he'll get a chance under Potter. And that he'd want to have a look at him. I felt for whatever reason, and I'm not quite sure why, I can't put my finger on one instance. I felt that there was a point at last season when he lost Tuchel's trust, which I thought was a bit harsh on him, because I agree with you. I thought he had an excellent season, and yes, he made mistakes, but I don't think he made any more mistakes than some other defenders. But he, for whatever reason, and Tuchel, don't get me wrong, I know that Tuchel was really impressed with him and really liked him, but he lost that bit of trust from him, and I couldn't quite understand why. And so if Tuchel was still at the club, I would certainly be saying I think a January loan or a January move is probably the most likely. I'd be reticent to say that now that Potter's come in, because I just don't really know how that's going to play out at the moment. I would hope he gets a chance under Potter. And I think he deserves a chance. I think he's as deserving as a chance as other people. And I would like to see it go well for him, because I think he's just been a model of how a young player should try and take a chance at a club when everyone had probably written him off a couple of years ago. Me included. I put myself in that as well. I didn't see him coming through, and he's proved people like me wrong. So one way or the other, I hope it works out for him.
Yeah.
And I think he reacted to someone on Twitter the other day. I saw he reacted to a message on Twitter where I think someone had put something rubbish up about a game being played and the first team losing a game when the first team weren't even in a training, and someone said, "Oh, Chalobah will have made mistakes." And I think Trevor responded on Twitter and kind of saying, "Oh, it's always Trevor, isn't it?" That probably hints at a little bit of frustration on his side at the moment, that he's frustrated because he stayed. He probably thought about leaving in the summer. We know he thought about leaving. Let's not beat around the bush, and was convinced to stay and have chances. And at the moment, I'd imagine he's a little bit frustrated, but hopefully there are chances there for him.
Are we potentially going to do that thing where we go and sign all the former managers' players with Moises Caicedo potentially coming in? We pre-bought Cucurella. We sadly pre-sold Gilmore, who Phil at Chelsea Youth is determined will come back, as he's predicted in the future to play for Graham Potter at Chelsea. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't like it when managers do that. I think if you look at the best managers, when they move upwards, they actually don't often do that. Klopp didn't start buying all his old players at Liverpool. Pep, I don't think, started buying all his old players at City. I'm sure people can, I'm thinking off the top of my head, I'm sure there'll be people who can throw examples at me. But I actually think there's reasons why certain players work in certain clubs at certain times. And are we still here?
Yeah.
And I think going from Brighton to Chelsea is a massive leap. And that's not to say that no Brighton player can do it, because Cucurella started well, and that there might be other players who can. But I wouldn't expect Graham to just go and sign a load of Brighton players, put it that way. And I think if you're a top manager, when you get that top club, I think the really good managers who have the great success probably realise that certain players were good at a certain moment in a certain club. Look at Basuma at Tottenham. He can't get in the team. So it's a big difference when you change these clubs. So I mean, let's see. But I maybe one more, and obviously Caicedo's an easy one to look at because of the sort of midfield situation at Chelsea. But if I was Chelsea, I'd be looking higher than Caicedo, and I think they certainly in the first instance are looking higher than Caicedo.
Any others that are on the radar for January? We know about some of the bigger names that won't happen for January, obviously.
Yeah, look, I think January they will certainly have a look around depending on where the team are at the moment. This feels like an excuse, and I'm sorry, but obviously with the change of manager and us not having played any Premier League games at him, a lot's going to be dependent on the next few weeks in terms of that. And things will become a little bit clearer at where he's looking. But, you know, the big targets, the Bellingham, the Rices, the Nkunku at Leipzig, the possibility of going for a goalkeeper, I can't see any of them happening in January. So January is going to be more about whether there's an obvious thing they need to fit Graham Potter's style, I think, whether there's an obvious gap that he can't play one certain way he wants to, or there's an obvious gap somewhere. I actually thought Chelsea probably didn't need to do quite as much business as they did in the summer, given that it now turns out that they made the managerial change. January is going to be a strange old window after the World Cup. I'm sure they'll look, and because it's a new ownership and a new manager, there'll be a lot of ideas floating around. But I would suspect they'd be better to hold fire and go for the really big guys in the summer, and actually spend that from now until then preparing the way, which I'm told they are. I did an article today that I think Bowley is now trying to make relationships around Jude Bellingham, to relationships that some of the other clubs have been able to make much earlier because of the nature of Chelsea's takeover. I think Bowley's in the process of trying to make those relationships. He'd be much better off spending the next 4 months fostering those relationships towards trying to do something there, and maybe Declan Rice or something, than trying to plug gaps in January, would be my personal opinion.
Well, I'm excited
on departures. If all of a sudden they can sell Ziyech and Pulisic in January because of the World Cup, then they might feel they have to bring in some sort of wide play, because you can't lose two and not bring anybody in.
Well, I'm excited for the new club medical chief announcement video from the comms team that they can practice on until we get those signings. But hey, Matt, we appreciate all your time and helping kind of wrap up everything for us over the week. It's been super interesting, as we laughed about. Nothing's happened yet, so much has, and that is why you have almost an hour-long podcast with us. So thank you.
Exactly. Cheers, guys. Good to see you.
Awesome. All right, Chelsea fans, more content coming at you this week. Get ready for the Crystal Palace match at the weekend. Football is back, and so are we. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.